Kang Junseo's pen stopped mid-signature. The boardroom had gone silent 3 seconds ago, waiting for him to finalize the merger that would eliminate 200 jobs and secure his company's dominance in the semiconductor market. His hand hovered over the contract. Outside the glass walls of his corner office, Seoul glittered like a circuit board, every light a reminder of what he controlled. He signed. Applause rippled around the table, polite, calculated, as empty as the champagne flutes being distributed by his assistant. Junseo stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and left without touching his glass. He never stayed for celebrations. Celebrations required you to feel something. The restaurant was a mistake from the beginning. He'd told his driver to take him somewhere quiet, somewhere without private rooms or sommeliers who recognized his face. The place his driver chose was upscale enough to be clean, ordinary enough to be forgettable. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, the kind of place that charged $40 for a steak and called it accessible luxury. Junseo took a corner table, his back to the wall. Old habit. He ordered without looking at the menu, he always did, and prepared himself for the usual routine. The double takes, the whispered speculation, the careful distance people maintained around men like him, as if power were contagious, and they weren't sure if they wanted to catch it. The stairs came on schedule, a couple near the window, a businessman at the bar. Even the hostess glanced twice before looking away. Junseo had stopped noticing years ago, the way you stop noticing the hum of an air conditioner. It was just the background noise of his life. Then she refilled his water glass. He didn't see her approach. He was reading an email on his phone, something about the merger already causing problems, when a hand, dark brown, steady, reached across his peripheral vision and poured water into his glass. He looked up. She was smiling, not at him. Not really. It was the kind of smile you'd give anyone, the kind that said you were having a decent shift, and the customer at table 7 hadn't been rude yet, and maybe you'd get off work early if the evening stayed slow. It was a smile that wanted absolutely nothing from him. Junseo froze. "Can I get you started with anything else?" she asked. Her voice was warm, textured, like she actually cared about the answer, but wouldn't be offended if he said no. He stared at her for a beat too long. She wore a simple black uniform, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. No makeup except something subtle around her eyes. A name tag that read, Amani, in print. So small, he had to lean forward slightly to read it. "No," he said. "Thank you. No problem. Let me know if you need anything." She walked away. That was it. 15 seconds, maybe 20. She didn't linger, didn't ask what he did for a living, or comment on his watch, or pretend to remember him from some gala. She just smiled, did her job, and left. Junseo sat there, water glass in hand, feeling like someone had just moved a piece of furniture in a room he'd lived in for years. Everything looked the same, but the space felt different. His steak arrived. He ate it without tasting it. When Amani returned to clear his plate, she asked if everything had been okay. He said yes. She said great. She brought his check, thanked him, and moved to the next table. He left a tip that would have raised eyebrows if anyone had been watching, but no one was. In the car ride home, Junseo caught himself replaying the interaction, not because anything significant had happened. That was the problem. Nothing had happened, and somehow, that nothing felt more real than anything he'd experienced in months. His penthouse was silent when he arrived. 43rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. Furniture chosen by an interior designer he'd met once. Everything in shades of gray and white and black colors that didn't demand anything from you. He stood at the window for an hour, tie loosened, and tried to remember the last time someone had smiled at him without wanting something. He couldn't. The next evening, Junseo had dinner at the restaurant again. He told himself it was convenient. He told himself the food was acceptable, and his driver had already learned the route. He did not tell himself he was looking for a waitress whose smile had unsettled him more than a $50 million contract dispute. Amani wasn't working his section. He watched her move between tables on the other side of the dining room, efficient and unhurried. She laughed at something an elderly woman said, a real laugh, and Junseo felt something twist in his chest that might have been envy. He returned on Friday. This time, she was assigned to his section. She approached with the same easy professionalism, no recognition in her eyes. "Welcome back," she said, and he couldn't tell if she actually remembered him or if that was just something servers said. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Water's fine." "You got it." When she returned with his water, he surprised himself by speaking. "You work a lot of evenings?" Amani set down the glass, her expression pleasant but guarded in the way of someone who'd learned to navigate personal questions from customers. "Most nights, yeah. Dinner shift pays better." "That must be difficult." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Not suspicious, just curious. "Difficult how?" "The hours, the work." "It's honest work," she said simply. "I've had worse. You ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes?" He ordered the steak again. She wrote it down, smiled that same uncomplicated smile, and left. Over the next 3 weeks, Junseo became a regular. He arrived at 7:15 on weeknights, when he could rearrange his schedule. He learned that Amani worked Mondays through Fridays, that she sometimes covered Saturday shifts when the restaurant was short-staffed, that she had Sundays off. He learned this by showing up. Their conversations stretched from polite exchanges into something resembling actual dialogue. She asked what he did for work. He said he was in business. She asked what kind. He said technology, which wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. She didn't press. "What about you?" he asked one night, after she'd brought his check. "Is this what you want to do?" Amani laughed, but it wasn't bitter. "That's a big question for a Wednesday night. You don't have to answer." "No, it's fine." She leaned against the booth across from him, checking to make sure her other tables were okay. "I don't know yet. I'm figuring it out. Some people have their whole lives mapped at 21. I wasn't one of them. Still not, honestly." "That seems wise." "Does it?" She raised an eyebrow. "Most people tell me I should have a plan. Most people are afraid of uncertainty." "And you're not?" Junseo considered the question. In his world, uncertainty was a weakness to be eliminated. Markets were predicted. Outcomes were controlled. Risk was calculated down to the decimal point. But sitting across from Amani, watching her lean casually against a booth-like time, was something you could afford to waste. He felt the script flip. "I used to think I wasn't," he said. She smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes, and said, "I like that answer." Then she moved to clear a nearby table, and Junseo sat there, feeling like he'd passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. The 4th week, she started calling him June. He'd introduced himself that way the second time he'd come in. A split-second decision he hadn't planned. Not a lie, exactly. Just not the full picture. Kang Junseo, the CEO whose face appeared in financial magazines and whose net worth was publicly speculated about online, became June, the quiet customer who tipped well and didn't talk much. In her presence, the edit felt like relief. "Rough day?" Amani asked one evening, setting down his water. She'd noticed he'd arrived 20 minutes earlier than usual, tie askew, jaw tight. "Something like that." "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough." She pulled out her order pad. "Steak?" "Please." She started to walk away, then paused. "For what it's worth, whatever it is, I'm sure you'll handle it." "Why are you sure?" "Because you seem like someone who handles things." She shrugged. "Just an observation." He watched her go, throat tight. She had no idea what he handled. The hostile takeovers, the layoffs, the shareholder meetings where men twice his age looked at him with resentment, barely concealed behind professional courtesy. She had no idea, and that was exactly why her confidence felt like a gift. That night, in his penthouse, Jun Seo stood at his window and thought about dignity. Amani had mentioned it in passing the week before, talking about a customer who'd been rude to her. She hadn't raised her voice or complained. She'd simply said, "I don't care how much money someone has. They don't get to take my dignity." The phrase had lodged in his brain like a splinter. Jun Seo had spent his entire adult life accumulating power, operating under the assumption that power was the thing that protected you. But Amani carried herself like someone who didn't need protection because she'd already decided what she was worth. He envied that. More than the money, more than the control, he envied her certainty about her own value. By week 6, Jun Seo had rearranged his entire schedule around her shifts. Board meetings got moved to mornings. Dinners with investors were declined. His assistant started asking questions, politely, carefully, about why his evenings were suddenly blocked off. Jun Seo didn't answer. The restaurant became the only place where he felt present. Everywhere else, he was performing. The visionary CEO, the ruthless negotiator, the son who'd exceeded his father's legacy before turning 35. But at that corner table, with Amani refilling his water and asking if he wanted his steak medium rare, he was just a person. It was addictive. "You ever think about doing something else?" he asked her one night. They were talking more now, real conversations that stretched beyond the transactional. She'd started sitting down for a minute or two when the restaurant was slow, when her manager wasn't watching too closely. "Like what?" Amani asked. "I don't know. You're clearly intelligent. You could do anything." She laughed. "That's a nice thing to say, but intelligence doesn't pay rent." "It could, though, with the right opportunity." Her expression shifted, something careful sliding into place. "Are you offering me something?" "No, I just meant, because I'm not looking for rescue," she said, her voice still warm but with an edge now. "I'm doing fine." Jun Seo felt the ground shift under him. "I didn't mean to imply. I know," she softened. "But people do that a lot. They see the uniform and assume I'm waiting for someone to save me. I'm not. I'm building something. It just doesn't look impressive yet." "I think it looks plenty impressive." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Thanks, Jun." The way she said his name, like it was something ordinary, something that didn't come with a corporate title or a stock price, made his chest ache. The truth started closing in during week 7. Jun Seo was reading something on his phone when he heard the TV above the bar switch to a financial news channel. He glanced up instinctively, a reflex from years of monitoring his company's public image. His own face stared back at him from the screen. The segment was about the semiconductor merger, footage of him leaving a courthouse, surrounded by lawyers. The ticker at the bottom read, "Kang Jun Seo's Hanseong Group finalizes acquisition." Jun Seo's blood went cold. He looked around the restaurant. No one was watching the TV except a businessman at the bar who was scrolling through his phone. Amani was in the kitchen. The moment passed, but the clock was ticking now. He tried to tell her. 3 separate times, he opened his mouth to say something, to explain, to give her the truth before she found it somewhere else. But every time, the words caught in his throat. Because what was the truth? That he'd been lying to her for 2 months? That he was a billionaire who'd been pretending to be ordinary? That every conversation they'd had was built on an omission so large it might as well have been a lie? She'd said she hated dishonesty. She'd said it casually, talking about an ex-boyfriend who'd cheated. "I can forgive a lot of things," she'd said, "but not dishonesty. Once you lie to me, we're done." Jun Seo had nodded like he agreed, knowing he was already guilty. His assistant confronted him on a Tuesday morning. "You need to stop," Min Jun said, standing in Jun Seo's office with his arms crossed. They'd known each other for 15 years. Min Jun was one of the few people who could speak to him directly. "Stop what?" "Going to that restaurant. Sir, someone is going to recognize you. Someone probably already has. If this becomes a story, it won't. You don't know that. Minjun's voice was urgent now. And even if it doesn't, what's the endgame here? You can't keep pretending to be someone you're not. Junseo leaned back in his chair. I'm not pretending to be anyone. Yes, you are. You're pretending to be a normal person, and you're not. You're Kang Junseo. That means something. You can't just ignore it because you met someone who doesn't know who you are. Maybe that's exactly why I can't stop. Minjun stared at him. This is going to end badly. I know. But he didn't stop. The end came on a Thursday. Junseo arrived at the usual time. Amani greeted him with a smile, asked about his day, brought him water. The routine was so established now it felt like choreography. Then a man in an expensive suit walked in. Junseo recognized him immediately. Lee Sang-min, a venture capitalist he'd met at a conference. The man's eyes swept the restaurant, landed on Junseo, and lit up with recognition. Kang Junseo. Sang-min crossed the room with his hand extended. I didn't expect to see you here. This is quite a surprise. Everything stopped. Amani was 2 tables away, holding a tray. She turned at the sound of the name, her expression curious. Junseo stood slowly, shaking Sang-min's hand, because refusing would have caused a scene. Lee Sang-min, good to see you. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for months, Sang-min said, oblivious to the disaster he was causing. Your assistant keeps saying you're booked. I didn't realize you frequented places like this. I thought you were more of a private club type. I like the food here. Clearly, Sang-min laughed. Well, I won't interrupt your evening, but let's connect soon. I have a proposal I think you'll find interesting. He handed Junseo a business card and left. The silence that followed was deafening. Junseo turned. Amani was standing perfectly still, the tray balanced on her hip, her face unreadable. Then she walked into the kitchen. He waited. 10 minutes later, she came to his table. Her expression was calm, professionally neutral, but her eyes were different, guarded. So, she said quietly, Kang Junseo. He couldn't speak. The billionaire CEO. Her voice was steady. The one who's been all over the news for that merger. That's you. Amani, why didn't you tell me? I wanted to. I tried. No. She shook her head. You didn't try. You let me talk to you like you were a regular person. You let me sit at your table and tell you about my life, my problems, my stupid everyday concerns, and the whole time you were— She stopped, jaw tight. You were playing some kind of game. It wasn't a game. Then what was it? Junseo stood. Around them, other diners were starting to notice, but he didn't care. It was the only place I could be honest. Honest? Amani's laugh was sharp. You lied to me for 2 months. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell me you're one of the richest men in Korea. That's a pretty big detail to leave out, June. Or should I call you Mr. Kang? Sir, what's the appropriate title for someone who's been pretending to be normal? Her words hit like physical blows. I never pretended, he said. Everything I told you was real. The conversations, You let me believe you were safe. Her voice cracked, just slightly. You sat there and let me think you were just some guy who worked in tech, some regular person I could talk to, and the whole time, you were hiding behind my ignorance. That's not— I told you I hate dishonesty. I told you that specifically, and you just nodded like it didn't apply to you. Junseo felt something break inside him. You're right. Amani blinked. You're right, he said again. I should have told you. I knew I should have told you, and I didn't, because I was selfish. Because for 2 months, you were the only person who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a bank account or a business opportunity or a threat. And I wanted to keep that. So I took it from you without asking. And that was wrong. She stared at him. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know that nothing I said to you was a performance. This— he gestured at the space between them. This was the most honest I've been in years. Amani's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She took a breath, then another. I believe you, she said finally. I believe that you meant it. But that doesn't change what you did. I know. I liked you. Her voice was soft now, almost wondering. I actually liked you. I thought maybe. She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought. It matters to me. Well, it shouldn't. She straightened, pulling her professional mask back into place. I hope you have a good evening, Mr. Kang. Someone else will bring your check. She walked away. Junseo stood there for a moment, surrounded by curious stares and silence. Then he left cash on the table. Too much, but it didn't matter, and walked out into the Seoul night. He didn't go back to the restaurant. The weeks that followed were strange. Junseo went through the motions of his life with the same efficiency he always had. Board meetings, contract negotiations, strategic planning sessions for the next fiscal year. Everything continued exactly as it had before. But he'd changed. It showed in small ways. He started noticing people, really noticing them. The security guard in his building who always said good morning. The junior analyst who brought coffee to meetings and never spoke. The housekeeper who cleaned his penthouse and left origami cranes on his kitchen counter, a detail he'd never paid attention to before. He started saying thank you, not the automatic, dismissive version he'd used before, but real gratitude that required eye contact. His assistant noticed. You seem different, Minjun said one afternoon. Different how? I don't know. Present, maybe. Junseo considered that. Present. He'd spent 38 years moving through life like a shark. Forward motion the only thing keeping him alive. Stopping meant vulnerability. Stopping meant feeling. Amani had made him stop. He thought about her constantly, not obsessively. He didn't try to contact her, didn't send flowers or letters, or any of the gestures his money could have bought. He thought about her the way you think about a turning point. The moment that divides your life into before and after. She'd asked him what he wanted that night at the restaurant. He still didn't have an answer, but he was starting to understand the question. 3 months after their last conversation, Junseo found himself walking past the restaurant. He didn't plan it. He was leaving a meeting downtown, and his driver suggested a route that took them through the neighborhood. Junseo looked out the window and saw the familiar brick exterior, the Edison bulbs glowing warm in the dusk. Stop here, he said. He didn't go inside. He just stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, and looked through the windows. The dinner rush was starting. Servers moved between tables with practiced efficiency. He couldn't see Amani, but that didn't mean she wasn't there. A couple walked past him, laughing about something. A delivery driver double-parked and hurried inside with a bag of food. Life continued, ordinary and beautiful, and completely indifferent to his presence. Junseo realized he was smiling. Not because he was happy, he wasn't. Not exactly. But because he'd learned something. You could want connection more than control. You could value honesty more than image. You could lose something precious and be grateful it existed at all. Amani's smile hadn't wanted anything from him, but it had given him everything he didn't know he'd been missing. The permission to be human. The reminder that dignity wasn't something you bought or earned. It was something you recognized in yourself and others. The understanding that presence mattered more than power. He'd lost her. That was the truth, and no amount of money, thought, or influence could change it. But he'd found something else. The possibility of a different kind of life. One where success wasn't measured in acquisitions, but in moments of genuine connection. Where strength meant vulnerability, and honesty meant risk. Junseo took a breath of cool evening air, then signaled his driver. As the car pulled away, he looked back one last time at the restaurant. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of movement. Dark hair, a familiar silhouette. For a second, he thought he saw her. Then the angle changed, and she was gone. It was enough. He'd spent his entire life building an empire based on the idea that more was always better. More money, more power, more control. But Amani had shown him a different equation. Less pretense, more truth. Less performance, more presence. That was the gift she'd given him, whether she'd meant to or not. And as Seoul glittered around him, Kang Jun-seo finally understood what it meant to be rich in ways money couldn't reach. He was still learning, still fumbling towards something he couldn't quite name. But he was learning, and that was enough. For now, it was enough. If you enjoyed this story about unexpected connection and the courage to be honest, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional storytelling. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when someone changed your perspective just by being genuinely themselves. What did they teach you? We'd love to hear your stories. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that don't want anything from us. They just remind us of who we could be.